Have you ever noticed that the strongest man in the room rarely explains himself? He doesn't argue to prove his worth. He doesn't chase approval. He doesn't react to every insult. And strangely, the less he does, the more powerful he appears. Most people think strength is about adding more confidence, more discipline, more knowledge, more money. Machiavelli would disagree. Real power often comes from subtraction. Because before a man becomes respected, feared, or impossible to manipulate, he quietly removes the habits, attachments, and weaknesses that others use against him. The dangerous part? Most people never notice what he eliminated. They only notice the results. Today you'll discover the hidden things strong men quietly erase from their lives, and why doing it in silence gives you an advantage no loud display of confidence ever could. But first, if you're committed to becoming mentally unshakable, write this affirmation in the comments. I choose discipline over distraction. That single sentence is more than a comment. It's a declaration to yourself that your future decisions will no longer be controlled by emotion or by other people's expectations. Now, let's begin. One of the greatest mistakes a man can make is believing that everyone deserves an explanation. From childhood, we're taught to justify our choices, defend our intentions, and prove that we're good people. But the older you become, the more you realize that explanations rarely create understanding. More often, they create opportunities for criticism. Machiavelli understood this long before modern psychology gave it a name. Every time you rush to explain yourself, you hand others a map of your thinking. Some will use it to question you, some to judge you, and a few to manipulate you. They are not listening to understand you. They are listening to find leverage. Strong men quietly eliminate this habit. They stop treating every disagreement like a courtroom where they must defend their character. They recognize that people usually interpret your words through their own biases, not through your intentions. If someone has already decided who you are, another explanation won't change their mind. In fact, the more passionately you defend yourself, the more uncertain you appear. Confidence doesn't demand acceptance, it simply moves forward. Notice how people naturally trust those who remain composed under scrutiny. Silence creates an air of certainty that endless talking never can. This doesn't mean becoming cold or arrogant. It means understanding that your actions carry far more authority than your arguments. A man who consistently keeps his promises, maintains his standards, and lives according to his principles doesn't need to narrate his life to earn respect. His behavior becomes the explanation. Ironically, when you stop trying to control everyone's opinion of you, you gain control over the only thing that truly matters, your own direction. That quiet certainty is where real influence begins. One of the most invisible chains a man can wear is the need to be liked. It doesn't look dangerous because it often disguises itself as kindness, humility, or being easy to get along with. But beneath the surface, it slowly hands control of your life to other people. Every decision begins with the same question: what will they think? Without realizing it, your words become softer, your ambitions become smaller, and your opinions become carefully edited to avoid disapproval. Machiavelli warned that anyone who depends too heavily on the affection of others eventually loses the freedom to lead himself. Approval is pleasant, but dependence on it is a weakness that others instinctively recognize. Strong men quietly eliminate this addiction before it defines them. They understand that praise is temporary and criticism is inevitable. If your confidence rises with compliments and collapses with rejection, then your identity has been placed in the hands of strangers. Modern psychology calls this external validation. And it creates emotional instability because your sense of worth constantly depends on forces you cannot control. The powerful alternative is to build an internal standard. Instead of asking whether people approve, ask whether your actions align with your principles. Instead of chasing applause, pursue competence. Respect earned through consistency lasts far longer than admiration won through performance. Ironically, the moment you stop trying to impress everyone is often the moment people begin respecting you more. They sense that your decisions are no longer driven by fear of rejection, but by conviction. And conviction is difficult to manipulate. When your self-worth comes from your discipline rather than other people's opinions, you become emotionally independent, a quality that cannot be bought, pressured, or taken away. Most people lose battles they never needed to fight because they react before they think. An insulting remark, an unexpected betrayal, a disrespectful message, or a moment of public criticism instantly triggers emotion. Pride demands a response. Anger insists on immediate action. Yet, this impulse is exactly what gives other people power over you. Machiavelli understood that the man who can predict your reactions can also predict your decisions. If someone knows how to provoke you, they no longer need to defeat you. They only need to press the right emotional button. Every uncontrolled reaction reveals where your weaknesses are hidden. Strong men quietly eliminate the habit of immediate response. They replace impulse with observation. Instead of asking, "How do I answer this?" they first ask, "Why is this happening?" That brief pause creates an enormous advantage. While everyone else is consumed by emotion, they gather information. They notice motives, patterns, and intentions that anger would have concealed. Modern psychology describes this as emotional regulation, the ability to interrupt automatic impulses before they become actions. It is one of the clearest signs of maturity and self-mastery. A calm mind sees possibilities that an emotional mind cannot. Silence also creates uncertainty. When people expect an instant reaction and receive none, they begin questioning themselves. They wonder whether you noticed, whether you care, or whether you already understand something they don't. That uncertainty often causes them to reveal more than they intended. They talk too much, become careless, or expose their true motives while trying to force a response from you. In the end, patience becomes a strategic weapon. Every emotional reaction you refuse to give is energy you preserve, clarity you protect, and control you keep firmly in your own hands. That quiet discipline is what makes a man increasingly difficult to manipulate. Many men waste years trying to prove they are right. They enter debates they never needed to join, argue with people who have no intention of listening, and exhaust themselves defending ideas that will never be accepted by everyone. At first, it feels like confidence. In reality, it often reveals an attachment to the ego. Machiavelli understood that power is not measured by how many arguments you win, but by how effectively you achieve your objectives. An argument may satisfy your pride for a moment, yet it can cost you something far more valuable: your focus, your reputation, or your emotional control. The strongest men recognize that not every challenge deserves a response. Most people don't argue to discover the truth. They argue to protect their identity. Once a person's beliefs become part of who they think they are, facts alone rarely change their mind. Every point you make is interpreted as a personal attack rather than an invitation to think differently. This is why so many conversations become louder without becoming wiser. Strong men quietly eliminate the need to convince everyone because they understand that reality has a way of settling debates that words never can. Instead of spending hours proving themselves, They invest that same energy into building results that cannot be questioned. There is also a hidden psychological advantage in walking away. The person who remains calm while refusing unnecessary conflict demonstrates a level of self-control that others instinctively respect. Silence often communicates confidence more powerfully than the perfect comeback. When you no longer feel compelled to have the final word, you deny others the satisfaction of controlling your emotions. Your attention stays where it belongs, on your goals rather than on endless disputes. Over time, people begin to notice something unusual. You are no longer distracted by petty battles, and because of that, you keep advancing while others remain trapped in conversations that change nothing. That is the difference between protecting your ego and protecting your future. Not everyone who enters your life comes with good intentions. Some people don't want your success, your wisdom, or your friendship. What they truly want is your attention. They understand that attention is one of the most valuable resources you possess, because wherever it goes, your energy follows. Machiavelli recognized that influence begins long before open conflict. It begins with access. The more access someone has to your thoughts, your emotions, and your time, the easier it becomes for them to shape your decisions. This is why strong men become extremely selective about who is allowed close to them. They quietly eliminate relationships that constantly drain more than they contribute. These people are not always obvious. They rarely announce themselves as manipulators. Instead, they create endless drama, manufacture unnecessary problems, demand constant reassurance, or pull you into conflicts that have nothing to do with your purpose. Every interaction leaves you mentally exhausted, yet you struggle to explain why. Modern psychology refers to this as emotional depletion. Certain relationships consume cognitive and emotional resources until you have little energy left for the things that actually matter. The danger is that this process happens gradually, making it easy to mistake exhaustion for a normal part of life. Strong men respond differently. They don't launch dramatic confrontations or seek revenge. They simply reduce access. They answer less often, reveal less about themselves, and stop investing time where there's no mutual respect. Distance becomes their boundary, and consistency makes that boundary impossible to misunderstand. This quiet withdrawal protects what is truly valuable: clarity of mind. Once your attention is no longer scattered among people who thrive on chaos, your thinking becomes sharper, your emotions become steadier, and your goals become easier to pursue. The greatest victory is not proving someone toxic. It is reaching the point where they no longer have the opportunity to influence your peace. That silent decision often changes the direction of a man's entire life. One of the greatest illusions of modern life is that being busy means being productive. From the moment you wake up, the world encourages constant movement. Answer every notification. Accept every invitation. Attend every meeting. Fill every empty moment with another task. At first, it feels like progress because you're always doing something. But Machiavelli would have recognized the danger hidden beneath this one endless activity. A man who is constantly occupied rarely has time to think strategically. He becomes reactive instead of intentional, allowing his schedule to be controlled by everyone except himself. Busyness can become a convenient disguise for avoiding the work that truly matters. Strong men quietly eliminate this illusion. They understand that movement without direction is simply another form of distraction. Rather than measuring success by how much they accomplish in a day, they measure it by whether their actions move them closer to their long-term objectives. Modern psychology supports this idea. Every decision, interruption, and task consumes a portion of your mental energy. By the end of the day, A mind scattered across dozens of insignificant responsibilities has little capacity left for deep thinking or meaningful progress. The busiest man is not always the most effective. Often, he is simply the most distracted. This is why powerful men become ruthless with their attention. They learn to say no without guilt, protect hours of uninterrupted focus, and refuse commitments that offer little value. They understand that every unnecessary obligation quietly steals time from something more important. While others chase the satisfaction of checking endless boxes, they concentrate on the few actions that create lasting results. Their lives may appear slower from the outside, but beneath that calm lies deliberate purpose. They know that a clear mind will always outperform a crowded schedule. In the end, real strength is not found in doing more than everyone else. It is found in eliminating everything that prevents you from doing what truly counts. One of the deepest fears most people carry is not failure or rejection, but solitude. They surround themselves with constant conversation, endless entertainment, and the opinions of others because silence forces them to confront themselves. The moment the distractions disappear, uncomfortable questions begin to surface. Am I living according to my own values, or am I simply following the crowd? Machiavelli understood that a man who cannot stand alone will eventually submit to those he fears losing. Dependence is not always financial or physical. More often, it is emotional. The need to belong can quietly become the need to obey. Strong men eliminate this fear without announcing it. They intentionally spend time alone, not because they dislike people, but because they value clarity. Solitude becomes a place where they can think without interruption, evaluate their decisions without outside pressure, and strengthen convictions that are based on reason rather than popularity. Modern psychology shows that constant social stimulation can influence judgment far more than we realize. People naturally conform to the expectations of those around them, even when those expectations conflict with their own beliefs. A man who never steps away from the crowd rarely discovers what he truly thinks. There is another advantage to becoming comfortable alone. It makes you remarkably difficult to manipulate. Threats of exclusion lose their power because your sense of worth is no longer dependent on being accepted. You no longer compromise your standards just to remain part of a group, nor do you chase relationships that drain your peace simply to avoid loneliness. Instead, every friendship becomes a choice rather than a necessity. Ironically, the man who is comfortable walking alone often attracts stronger relationships because his presence is genuine, not desperate. He values quality over quantity, substance over attention. In the quiet moments that others avoid, he develops self-knowledge, emotional stability, and independent judgment. These are qualities that no crowd can give you, and no crowd can take away. Perhaps the hardest thing a man will ever eliminate is not another person, a bad habit, or a distraction. It is the version of himself that no longer serves his future. Most people cling to old identities because they feel familiar. They continue seeing themselves as the insecure man who needed approval, the angry man who sought revenge, the fearful man who avoided responsibility, or the uncertain man who waited for permission before acting. They believe growth means adding something new, when in reality, it often begins by letting something old disappear. Machiavelli understood that survival belongs to those who adapt. A man who refuses to change eventually becomes predictable, and what is predictable is easily controlled. Strong men quietly abandon outdated identities without making dramatic announcements. They don't declare that they've changed. They simply begin making different decisions. They stop responding to disrespect the way they once did. They stop chasing people who have already shown disinterest. They stop apologizing for ambitions that make others uncomfortable. Every new choice weakens the old identity until it no longer exists. Modern psychology calls this identity-based change. Lasting transformation doesn't come from forcing isolated habits. It comes from becoming someone who naturally behaves differently because his beliefs about himself have changed. This process is rarely comfortable. There will be moments when people expect the old version of you to return. Some will even encourage it because your former weaknesses made you easier to understand and easier to influence. They may accuse you of becoming distant, cold, or different simply because your boundaries have become stronger. Resist the temptation to explain. Let your consistency speak for itself. Over time, your actions will introduce the new man more clearly than your words ever could. In the end, the real strength is not about becoming someone else. It is about removing every belief, habit, fear, and attachment that keeps you tied to a smaller version of yourself. The world may never notice what you quietly eliminated, but it will certainly notice the man who remains. Machiavelli understood a fundamental truth about power. Control begins with self-control. A man who cannot govern his own emotions, desires, and decisions will always be vulnerable to someone else controlling them. External enemies are rarely the greatest threat. The greater danger comes from the weaknesses we allow to remain inside our own character. Every unchecked impulse becomes a weakness. Every unnecessary attachment becomes a vulnerability. Every fear left unchallenged becomes a limitation. But when a man begins eliminating these weaknesses, something changes. He becomes calmer because he no longer needs constant validation. He becomes more focused because his attention is no longer scattered. He becomes more respected because his actions carry more weight than his words. People may not understand why he seems different, but they feel the difference. There is a quiet confidence in someone who no longer depends on external approval to know his own value. Remember, strength is not always about adding more force, more words, or more control over others. Sometimes the greatest display of strength is subtraction. It is knowing what no longer deserves access to your mind, your time, and your energy. It is having the courage to walk away from what weakens you, even when others don't understand your choice. The world often teaches men to chase more attention, more recognition, more possessions, more influence. But wisdom teaches something different. A man becomes powerful when he learns what to leave behind. So ask yourself honestly, what is one thing in your life that you already know you need to eliminate? A habit, a distraction, a relationship, a fear, a version of yourself that you have outgrown. The answer may reveal the next stage of your transformation. Write this affirmation in the comments. I remove what weakens me and protect what strengthens me. Not for anyone else to see, not for approval, but as a reminder to yourself that your future will be built by the things you choose to keep and the things you finally choose to release. Because sometimes the greatest power you gain is found in everything you have the courage to let go.